Welcome back to Ask the Professor. I'm Dave Dufour with Professor Terry Cooper down there in Somerville, Texas. We're talking about weather safety on the road. This isn't per se an RV tech particular feature, but it's an important one. Terry, your experience as an insurance adjuster, which is part of your technical training, has
That's
really
right.
shown you a lot of what storms can do to recreational vehicles.
It's kind of scary sometimes when you really look at some of the wind damage, some of the hail damage, some of the different things that have taken place. And like you say, if people had just thought about what they were doing or where they
Mm-hmm.
were, what they could have done to maybe gather some cover, they might not have had that unit totaled out that they
Right.
had. The one that they were just in love with, all of a sudden it's going off to the salvage yard.
Right. Well, and of course, being forewarned is forearmed as well. And what are some things that we can do in terms of watching the weather so that we can have a little bit of a better handle on what's coming on?
Well, there's really three things, and these are the top three things that I
Mm-hmm.
always look at is, watch the forecast. What's going on? I mean, the newscasters now and with the radar systems that we have, they're on top of this stuff. They know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to watch those clouds because things pop up sometimes. And the other thing is, you know what your backup plan is. What if all things break loose on you? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And here again, it's know what's going on around you. You know, I had a chance to spend some time with my little granddaughter yesterday, and
Right.
I was watching her, and I thought, she's so happy and everything's going on, but we got ready to cross the parking lot, and we had to take her by the hand
Mm-hmm.
because I thought she just was not aware. But we
Right.
were there with her, keeping an eye out for her safety. And it's the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
We're out with the kiddos, we're out with their family, we're out with everyone. We have to sometimes be the one that's vigilant, keeping an eye on these clouds, the weather reports, and know what's going on.
As far as forecasts are concerned, do you recommend the weather radios that pick up the National Weather Service forecasts? I assume, I mean, those don't really make for pleasant listening on a long-term basis. But if you start seeing some funny business, sometimes the way radio broadcasts are now, you may have a better. Uh, I don't know. Do you get better information from the National Weather Service via that kind of a vehicle?
Well, if you can handle that canned audio that they use sometimes, it's okay.
The robot
you know?
voice. Yeah, yeah. You don't really. It doesn't make for pleasant long-term listening, but
No.
that it does.
But no, I mean, really, if that's probably one of the items that I would strongly recommend that we have in our little toolkit
Mm-hmm.
that we have. And just, it's one of those things, it's the backup plan,
Right.
you know?
Well, and they have so many different varieties. Those they have some that that you can if you don't have power for some reason, or if there's some other. I mean, these issues come
Yeah.
up when you're camping and parked too, obviously. So, but you can crank up those radios with a little internal generator and still get a forecast and find out what's happening and when things are coming in and when they're going to end and that sort of stuff. In terms of backup plans, what is a typical idea for what a backup plan ought to be?
Well, and that's something we need to talk about in more detail. But honestly, some of the things we just need to be aware of when we come into a park. What are the facilities? Do they have designated areas? And
Mm-hmm.
I'd really like to go into a lot more detail on that in maybe another segment or
Okay.
another
All right.
time. But this is something that we just have to be aware of our surroundings.
Yes.
It's kind of one of those things that if you look at the weather channels, and sometimes we have those applications on our cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of making us aware of what's going on. But it's kind of like when you check into a hotel, you need to know where those exit signs are.
Sure.
And that's the same category. That's the same criteria that I would put under know what your exits are, know where your cover is, what's happening for you. And
Yeah.
like I say, if you're watching the forecast, and these are just a list of different places that I've come across that seem to do a real good job.
Mm-hmm.
The one that we all are most familiar with, particularly during hurricane season, is the National Weather Service.
Mm-hmm.
And around here, if we have a bad storm blow up, they'll interrupt television and run that
Sure.
scanner bar or that, what do we call it, the screen crawl across
Right.
the bottom
Right.
of the screen,
Sure.
and let us know that there's something touching down or there's some
Mm-hmm.
potential for issues. But when you look at the different terms, and that's something that I always hear people get a little confused about when you start talking about the weather terms,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly in this part of the country because we're probably more prone for tornadoes
Right.
than maybe some of the other parts of the world.
Right. Yeah. I was just going to point out that some of the things that you're listing here, as far as watching the forecast, some of these are television, some of these are websites, some of these are little web applications, little things that you can just add onto your browser that will beep at you when there's something coming up. Not all of these are great while you're actually driving, but now there will also be cell phone apps for your iPhone or your Android device as well that might be useful as too. So there's a lot of different weather monitoring kinds of systems, and most of them are free. So
That's true.
and so there's no reason not to do it. You were just talking about the weather terms here, and yeah, here in Indiana and across the Midwest, and especially down where you are. Are you in what they call Tornado Alley?
Believe it or not, we're just a little bit south
That's
of
what
it.
I thought. Yeah, a little south. Tornado Alley is more like Oklahoma and the northern part of Texas. Yeah. So,
And
but
maybe out towards West Texas.
right.
And like I tell a lot of my students when we were teaching a lot of renewable energy, one of the sources we talked about, of course, was wind energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to tell my students, say, guys, you see all those wonderful looking windmills out there, those wind turbines?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me just tell you, just because that wind's blowing really nice now, look what happens when those tornadoes start coming in, those high winds.
Right.
So any area that you're going to see wind turbines is probably going to be an area that's very susceptible to tornadoes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, we've had our share here, but yeah, in fact, since the middle '60s, when a raft of tornadoes came through here, we all got real familiar with these terms here: tornado watch, and then tornado warning. We'd never really heard those terms before, but watch is what?
It's just that there's patterns around there that have the potential of spawning some tornadoes. Now, it's not, don't go into the panic mode. It's just be aware that there's the potential of it. That's all.
Right. Yeah, and in the tornado warning, they tell you to seek shelter right away, and it's usually because somebody's seen one.
That's right.
Or they've seen a funnel cloud, which is just a tornado that hasn't hit the ground yet.
Exactly. I mean, what usually happens, and we all have seen a lot of the weather forecast and some of the weather radar that's out there, that can show that bright orange and bright red that's saying, hey, there's something in this area, and it has all the wind swirls and tells you that, hey, there's something happening. And I know I sat through one, it's probably been about 4 years ago, and we'd been watching it on the news, and sure enough, that baby come on through, and luckily it dodged us, but
yeah,
we were in some places trying to seek cover, let me tell you.
Yeah, they're not funny, and it is true what they say. They sound like freight trains in it from a distance.
Yes, they do.
And everybody,
Yes,
every time they
do.
interview somebody, they'll say, "Yeah, it sounded just like a freight train." Yeah, they do. I don't know why they do, but they sure do. Anyway, yeah, they can. And if you're hearing that and there's no train around, it's a little scary. We'll be right back after a short break, and we'll tell you some places not to be during bad weather when we come back on Ask the Professor. So stay with us. The Texas RV Professor wants to hear from you. Email your questions or comments to professor@rvnn.tv. If you have a specific problem, it really helps if you can send a photo as well. That makes it easier for Terry to diagnose your issue. You can also leave a voicemail for Terry Cooper at 877-578-RVNN, extension 708. Follow RV Newsnet on Facebook and Twitter, and you can receive text messages to alert you when we're streaming live by texting RVNN to 72727. That way, you can join us live in the chat room, ask questions, and become part of the RV Newsnet family. Remember, any photos or other material submitted to us become the property of RV Newsnet and cannot be returned. Today's show is brought to you by Angie's List, where you'll find thousands of unbiased reports and reviews about service companies in your area. Whether you're looking for a roofer, plumber, house cleaner, dentist, or even a doctor, Angie's List members share their experiences with each other so that you can choose the service company that's right for your job. Companies can't pay to be on Angie's List, and the reviews come from people just like you who have had experience with the companies mentioned. To find out more, go to rvnn.tv and click on the Angie's List ad.